Hi, I'm Steph. I'm an engineer at LinkedIn, and this is Sarbottom, another engineer at LinkedIn. Sarbottom came to me with an interesting mystery in his application. Something isn't functioning, and he knows I'm a sucker for interesting mysteries. Sarbottom, tell us a little bit more about your mystery.
First of all, thank you, Steph, for your time. The problem which I am currently seeing in my app, when I do the very first transition, I should also say this is an Ember app. It's a single page application. When I do the very first transition, and if I press the back button, the URL gets changed, but the UI doesn't get updated.
That's surprising. So it's just the first back button?
It is just the first back press after the very first transition.
That sounds super interesting. Can you show me?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. I'm excited.
I'm in this people route, and the UI with respect to people route is this one. So I will navigate to account list, which is the company route, and we see that the UI got changed. And now when I click the back button here, we can see that the route got changed, the URL got changed, but the UI did not get refreshed. What do you think when you see this for the very first time?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, this is clearly something wrong. One of Ember's goals is to have a routing layer that just works in all circumstances. So based on your experimentation in the app, every first load, the back button doesn't work.
Yes, that's correct.
But all subsequent back buttons work.
That's correct.
That is so bizarre. So the first thing I want to see is, during that first navigation, do we have any errors or logs or warnings? Let's start with that. My goal here is sort of for us to progressively narrow down which areas we need to look into more. I'm going to treat the app totally black box. I really don't know the code in your app. And I'm also going to treat Ember as black box, because I think some of the tricks and things that I feel make debugging easier, they don't really depend on a framework. They also don't really depend on a language. Lots of these tricks and ideas, they work cross-language and cross-framework. If you want to go through this again, but let's open up the console. Let's see if there's any warnings or errors that appear during that first transition where it's not behaving as we would expect. Every time we do a change, we should actually reload the route, because the error only happens, by reload the route, you actually mean hard reload the browser. It only happens the first time we do like a single page transition. Interesting, I saw no logging. So, no errors. Oh wait, we haven't even done the navigation yet. If you can do the navigation, then let's see if we see any logging or errors that might be relevant.
So let's go to company. It was fine again.
And now if we hit back, let's see what happens. Still nothing. Okay, so the URL changed, but the UI didn't update. So if the URL changed, the browser was told to go back, but Ember was not told to go back, because if Ember was told to go back, we would expect the UI to change.
Right.
All right. That's interesting. Okay. So what connects the back button with Ember?
I think the history API?
Yeah, I think it's the history API. So specifically, when we're mutating the URL via JavaScript, right, or changing it, the push state and replace state APIs on the history object are going to be invoked. Right, so that's our guess here is that at some point during this procedure, the native browser history HTML, the history APIs are going to be invoked. So what we should probably do is we should probably put a breakpoint at those two methods. Again, we don't know if anything's wrong with them, but I figure we can put a debugger somewhere in the code that we know must be invoked. And from there, I figure we can zoom around and understand what code is being called by or calling these methods.
So how would you put a debugger, and how do you know where to put a debugger?
Yeah, so there's a few ways that you can do a debugger. First of all, if we can find the code in the source, such as this, let's just pick this random function. I don't think this one is relevant to us, but if we put a breakpoint here, we can get a debugger. Cool. Push state's clearly coming from the browser. It's not going to, unfortunately, it doesn't show up. I don't think it shows up in the sources tab. So there's a cool feature that Chrome has. You can actually use the debug helper, such as this, to mark any function you have reference to as being a breakpoint. Well, let's just say we have the function foo here. Use someone else's keyboard. So we just created a function called foo. So we can invoke foo if we want from the console. Now if we use the debug helper provided by Chrome and pass a reference to foo to it, we've now told Chrome that when the foo function is invoked, we should pause at a breakpoint at the beginning of that function. we should be able to invoke this, and the breakpoint should stop at boom. My idea here is we can insert a breakpoint right on the browser's provided history APIs and go from there. Again, so what I usually do is I'll just try to find some code that I know has to get invoked in a problem area. I'll insert a breakpoint there and then explore. So in addition to bug, there's also undebug, which in theory should turn off the breakpoint for that reference function. So let's see if that works. Yeah. My thought here was let's just intercept the code as we're going into that bad place. We're going to insert a breakpoint on the history states, replace state, and push state APIs. So there's the HTML5 object history, and it should have push state. Right? I think it should also have replace state. Making sure when we navigate that they are being invoked correctly. They are being invoked. Replace state. We're going to have to do a manual transition.
Let's do on the account list. And I see it paused on debugger.
Perfect. When I find a debugger early, I realize I need to learn all the code relevant to it. So I figure let's figure out if we understand why this push state's being called, who's calling it, what it's calling. And even though that might be totally a waste, usually it isn't. I want to understand why this code is being invoked. And then as we navigate around and do other stuff, I want to see if that changes. So once we do get into a broken state, we should see if it's behaving differently. But again, for me, although I've worked on Ember, this area of code, I understand conceptually probably how it works, but it's probably changed since the last time I looked at it. I have no idea. So let's just figure it out. All right, so the first thing I see here is on the right-hand side, we have a call stack. The left-hand side is the code, currently minified. So we're going to press this button down here, which will pretty print the code and hopefully make it easier to read. If we go to settings here, there's a bunch of useful things in this area. And I believe this tab here will actually give us a list of all the keyboard shortcuts. Okay, cool. So now we have the code that's prettyified on the left-hand side. We can traverse the call stack here. So basically what this is telling us is it's telling us set URL is calling the push state method. The push state method is one of the methods that we set a breakpoint on using the debug helper. Set state is calling push state. The minified S method, which is coming from whatever this setup router thing is doing this. What is push state doing? All right, so push state is one of Ember's. It's a method on one of Ember's history location subclasses. It seems like it's taking the path. Cool. The path is sales lists company, which is
the previous URL.
All right. It's building a UUID. So this is probably some identifier. After that, we actually interact with history. My guess is the history is the same history object we debugged below, but let's confirm that to be true. Again, the goal here is we've sort of put a breakpoint in the middle of the world. We just want to confirm our hypotheses, and these are our hypotheses. And yeah, this looks like the history object. So we can just confirm this by doing that, just equaling it. And
okay.
Yep, it's the same guy. Cool. And N is this object we pushed here. And E is, what is E? E is the path. And finally, we're going to set a local state on the history location instance called previous URL. Actually, we are in the file called EmberRouter scroll locations EmberRouter scroll. Now we know where on disk this code lives. We can actually go and find this code in GitHub. In GitHub, you can type T, and you can get an autocomplete. You can basically just type location, router, and boom, router scroll, hit enter, done. Let's type add-on, and then it was...
Router scroll. I think the very
router
first
scroll.
one.
Cool, that one. Yeah, this looks like what I would expect. So I'll let you get us back into a state.
I have reloaded this page once again. Now I'll go to account. We are in debugger, so I'll just pass through the debugger real quick, and I'll press the back button. So we saw that the route got changed, not the UI. But we didn't land on any debugger.
When it comes to the debugger, the two places where we put the breakpoints, they were only when link 2s were getting clicked. They weren't on where the back button would engage. So when link 2 is clicked, we'll call push state. When the back button's clicked, the browser will call us via an add event listener. There's an event. I think it's a global event. If it's working correctly, the Chrome debugger has a tab down here, global listeners. And if I remember correctly, the history location event is a global listener. In theory, Ember should be attaching itself via like window add event listener. I think pop state is the right event that we want to look at. My guess is when we hit back, we're actually popping off the history. So let's expand this and let's see what's going on. Well, first of all, we expanded this. We can see that there's 2 event handlers at pop state. I would only really expect to see one, and that's the one from Ember, and I would expect to see no other one. Actually looks like the first one took us into what I believe to be Ember code. And this is Ember routing lib locate blah blah blah. This looks totally like Ember's code. Where previously it looked like we were in an add-on, now it looks like we're inside Ember's code. That's just because Ember-routing is the Ember provided module, and it's like importing things from inside Ember itself. Let's just set a breakpoint both on when we add the event listener and when the event listener is being invoked. Cool. Let's jump to the other event listener and let's see what is up.
This is our tracking part and all those things.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I know this.
Let's put a breakpoint here just to understand what's being invoked. I don't think we need to look into this much more, but if we can't figure out what's up, we can always come back. Let's jump back here. And breakpoints are set before, and then they're set in the callback. Perfect. Cool. Let's get back into the broken state.
So now if I press the back button, the issue should happen. So we are in a debugger. You actually got into...
Oh, this is the tracking code. Well, while we're here, let's just step through it. So what I'm going to do is command backtick. And now we're in the second event handler. And this is the one that we were expecting. So this is from Ember's code. Just to confirm, yeah, Ember routing. And this is the history location API. All right. This equation is kind of annoying to read. I don't want to I don't want to do that in my head. So I'm just going to copy paste this code, put it in the console. So let's see what T URL is. So I'm going to mouse over this guy. It says sales list people. So sales list people. So the current URL is sales list people. Cool. What is previous URL? In this scenario. What is previous URL? Sales list people. So it looks like it's the same thing.
Shouldn't it be different now? Because
yeah, I'm confused. We can't. Which URL did we just come from? Or is this where we're coming from, but we're going somewhere else? Let's do it again. I also don't know.
Yeah. So I'll just deactivate the breakpoints for the time being so that it will not break anywhere. I reload this route. Now I will turn on the debugger. Perfect. Because this is where the issue is happening. So I'll press the. So my previous route was company. I should use URL, no more route. Previous URL was company. Current URL is people. And technically speaking, if I just let the debugger run out here, the UI shouldn't get updated.
Shouldn't get updated. The first thing we hit is tracking. I think this is just a noise for us.
We can just remove that.
Let's turn off that breakpoint and let's continue. And now we're here. Okay. So again, we should see previous URL is people. But we're on people.
But the previous URL was company. This
previous
is for
URL
sure
was
we
company.
saw it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something is fishy here. Something is very fishy. T get URL, I can assume that that's supposed to be the current URL. That looks right. The previous URL, that doesn't look right to me. Before we saw an add-on that was overriding Ember code.
Yeah, EmberRouter scroll.
With the push state and replace state methods.
Yeah.
So let's figure out what those methods were supposed to do. I thought we looked at it in the code, but let's look closer, right?
Sure.
Maybe we must have missed something. Because I don't know what previous URL, who's setting it up or who's getting it. I thought the add-on was doing it as well, but let's compare the code side by side super carefully. Maybe we missed something. Because again, I thought the add-on was doing exactly what Ember was doing. So let's take a closer look. Here we go. Here's push state. So here's push state, and here's replace state. All right. So let's look. Let's close this side so we have a little bit more real estate, because I want to compare the code from the add-ons implementation of this. All right. Let's make sure our breakpoints are set here correctly as well.
I think this time your that global search might come handy. So it was Ember router scroll.
Yeah.
And
let's take a look at that one. Let's expand it. Let's also close this little guy here. So sure. A little bit more space. Let's pre-print it. Let's compare these things very closely. So on the left-hand side, we have Ember's base class for history location. On the right-hand side, we have EmberRouter scrolls subclass, which replaces push state and replaces replace state. So let's look at those two methods one by one. Let's look at push state. Okay, push state, NEO, N does a path. This looks about the same. The first few lines look the same, right? Because we're creating an object called N that has path E and has a UUID. I don't think we care about what the value. I suspect that's fine. The next line here is this history.pushState. This history.pushState looks the same to me. The next line, this is a little bit different. So on the left-hand side, we actually have underscore history state. So let's quickly see on the left-hand side, what is underscore history state actually doing? So in replace state, we set it. In push state, we set it. And in get state, we read it sometimes. So we read it if supports history. So underscore previous URL versus previous URL. That's right. On one side, we do Ember set. On the other side, we don't do Ember set. Are there any other differences that you
I see an underscore prefix here and no underscore prefix.
Oh,
there is that.
You're right. I totally didn't even see that because, man, that's probably the problem. The add-on is overriding push state and replace state, and it's writing to previous URL, not underscore previous URL. But Ember is writing to underscore previous URL.
And reading from underscore previous
and reading
URL.
from case. This is an app that's in production. There's a trick we can do in the debugger here where we can actually have the add-ons code do the Ember's codes set. So we can actually make the add-on also do, so in addition to setting previous URL, we can also have it set underscore previous URL. So let's do that. Let's have the real app in production make this change, and let's verify. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use the conditional breakpoint code. This is a trick I love to use.
What is that conditional breakpoint?
Okay, so we set a breakpoint before. If you control click it, you can actually edit the breakpoint. Then you have this place where you can write an expression. And the reason for this functionality is if this expression returns true, then the breakpoint will be engaged. If the expression returns false, then the breakpoint will be skipped. So this lets you write breakpoints that behave a little bit more dynamic. So Chrome lets you choose a breakpoint, which is what the blue thing is. Lets you choose a conditional breakpoint, which is run any code you want, and if it returns true, stop. If it returns false, don't stop. Continue. And finally, there's a log point, and I think that's primarily just for logging, but in our case, we only care about the top two right now. So I'm going to do a trick. I'm going to run code, because the expression can run any code I want, I'm going to write code that will actually set this underscore previous URL and then explicitly return false. So it will be code that, it will be a breakpoint that never stops, but it does actually mutate state the way that we want. So I copy pasted the code from the left-hand side. This is the code that Ember would like to be doing. And on the right-hand side, we're going to, in addition to the code that's running here, we're going to add an additional step, which is we're going to set underscore previous URL, semicolon, false, return false. So we can write whatever we want on the left-hand side, and as long as we get to the right-hand side, then this breakpoint won't hit, but we will have done a mutation on the right-hand side. The other thing that's weird is why don't we actually, I said the word return, but we don't return anything in this line. Turns out the expression syntax, I think it's the same as when you have an HTML on-click handler, which has an implicit return in it. Anyway, so I'm going to drop this one here, hit enter. Now you notice it went orangey yellow, and that's the color for a conditional breakpoint. I'm going to do the same thing here in replace state, right? Because remember, we are overriding two methods, push state and replace state. I don't think we're hitting replace state, but just in case, I'm going to add it here as well. Okay, so hypothetically, if our hypothesis is right, again, we don't know what we don't know for sure yet, but if our hypothesis is right, if we reload this page and we start going down your scenario again, everything should work.
I'm once again in the people URL. I'll go to company URL and I'll go to people. Oh, what happened? This time, I don't think it has. I'll redo it again. I don't know if it has fixed it, just to be double. Yeah. The issue didn't happen here.
I'm hopeful.
Most likely because of the code what you added, but I'll just redo it again so that so I'm in the company URL right now, and I see the UI got changed because account and company. If I do a back, the URL is getting changed. It's becoming people, and this should be list. Yep. That's how I know things are changing. And it is working.
Okay. Well, let's just be sure that everything is okay. So let's turn off our breakpoint.
Yes.
Let's turn off our breakpoint and try it again. And it should, you refresh the page, it should not work. This is a great way for us to quickly do an A/B test before we go and like maybe report an issue with the add-on that might be doing something wrong, and then also fix the code.
And so I'll just do the same thing again. I'll reload it. So this time issue should happen.
It should fail.
It should fail.
That's my hypothesis. Let's validate the hypothesis.
So people going to company. So now it should actually recreate the scenario if the hypothesis is correct.
Yeah.
And I think that hypothesis is starting to be a theory.
Yep. Let's do one more time with the breakpoints on. So let's delete all the breakpoints.
Sure.
Remove all breakpoints. Cool. We did that. Now let's add a conditional breakpoint here. I still have it in the paste buffer.
Sure.
Make it true. Cool. Do the same thing here.
I just wanted to reconfirm that the UI is still showing the company because we are in the debugger.
You're right.
If we pass the debugger, it should go back to lead. Let's try that.
Yeah, that is our hypothesis. And if that's the case, then we probably know exactly the cause of the problem.
And it went to lead.
Yeah. We've done it twice now. It seems to work. It seems totally reasonable that this is the problem. So we should probably open issue on that add-on. Again, T, add-on. All right. And, oh, I think they fixed the bug. Oh, looks like about a year ago. So we should check. Your app might be using an older version of. So it might be as simple as just upgrading the add-on, and we're good to go. That was awesome. Thanks for bringing me this issue. I always like when there's a hard to debug problem, and it's also nice that it didn't take 10 hours to debug, right? This, we got through it pretty quickly, and yeah, this was fun.
And likewise, thank you. The issue has been resolved by upgrading the EmberRouter scroll add-on, and the fix has been pushed to production. So I just reloaded the people route, and I will go to company route, and now I'll press the back button. And as we can see, not only the URL got changed, but also the UI got updated. Thank you for watching.